It's Cardboard Time, episode number 74, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, a review of Motor City and an interview with Josh Cappel of Kids Table Board Games and Burnt Island. Well, there's not a lot to talk about. In fact, there's nothing to talk about regarding the Shelf of Shame today. It is still at 151. I barely escaped having another one added to that total, but 20 strong didn't come in today, so just narrowly avoided that going up by another one. Hopefully I will have some time to play some things this week. I do have a couple of things that I think I can get to the table solo at the very least, so things have been busy, but you know how that goes. So no episode after this before PAX. The next episode is going to be our PAX U wrap up on December 5th. However, I may be doing some video content on my different social media platforms. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you enjoy my content on, I will also be on there. And I'm really looking forward to bringing you another PAX U wrap up. I will be covering it. Again, if you are at PAX Unplugged, please come by and say hi or get a hold of me if you want to meet up. I'm more than happy to meet up with you and just get to see everybody. I'm super excited about this. It's been too long since my last convention. In addition, some news. We do have a stream this Saturday on November 18th on twitch.tv/cardboardtime. That is going to be our playthrough of Toy Story Obstacles and Adventures, brought to you by the Op. We are playing that with Allie, so really looking forward to that stream and looking forward to getting back into the streaming mode of things. So let's talk about Motor City. From 2023. This was a review that was requested by a couple of different people, so I did want to talk about that on today's episode while I had the chance. Motor City plays from 1 to 5 players in 45 minutes, designed by Adam Hill, Ben Pinchback, and Matt Riddle. The art is by Ilya Avakov and Marlies Behrens. And this was published by 25th Century Games. Motor City is a strategic roll-and-write game about running an auto plant in the heyday of Detroit. In Motor City, you have 2 player sheets, each with multiple areas. These areas are represented by tracks that you will mark off as you make progress. Many of the tracks are interconnected with other elements in the game, giving you bonuses along the way and opportunities to unlock more points. Advancing on all of these tracks offers various amounts of points, advancements, and bonuses. The game lasts 8 rounds. Each round, roll colored dice based on the number of players, then place them on spaces on the blueprint table based on value and color. Each player drafts 1 die and uses it. Once everyone has drafted a die twice, all players get to use the remaining die on the blueprint table. After 8 rounds, you score points for your progress in engineering, assembly, testing, and more. Whoever has the most points wins. Motor City has a solo mode in which you try to top your own score against an auditor that drafts dice and blocks areas of your sheet. Its difficulty can be adjusted by changing the colors of the dice during setup with no added rules. Motor City is Game 3 of the Motor City GameWorks Loaded Roll and Write series. Game 1 being Fleet the Dice game, and Game 2 being Three Sisters. So I picked this up from God's a Lot of Games. I did love the other 2 games in this series quite a bit, and I wasn't really prepared until today to give my thoughts on the order on which I like these games. I will be doing that in my final thoughts. So for this, though, I do love the theme, being an engineer, the whole factory aspect of it and engineering, really kind of clicked with me. But I love the theme in the other games as well. There are plentiful amounts of Office Space references if you're a fan. Specifically, TPS reports are literally referred to as TPS reports. You need those to advance in certain areas and get certain bonuses. And then there's like the Bob's expansion, that kind of thing. So if you're a fan of that, there's a little nod and a little reference to that. The engineering track provided the ability to open up a lot of other parts of the board, and it was a very fun thematic touch. It was where I spent most of my time because I wanted to explore, I wanted to unlock a bunch of different stuff, and that was kind of the most intriguing thing to me. And upgrading the actions was also very fun. So you have these 4 different actions that you can take with the dice, and you start off with only being able to take 1 per die that was used, rather. And you can actually upgrade that to get as many as 3 actions using that die, 3 of the same action. So that was a very fun touch. That was something that I also really wanted to do very quickly. And that's one of the reasons I also really focused on the engineering track quite a bit. I didn't get the same amount of like bouncing from square to square as the other games with all the combos and that. It was there. It didn't feel quite as good, but it was there. There was definitely some hints of that in this game. There were a couple of issues with the rulebook not being the greatest. I would definitely watch a video if you're trying to learn this game because the layout of it isn't necessarily the greatest for learning the game. You also might need to go to BGG to check for clarifications and some fairly important ones at that too. So I was a little bit disappointed with the rulebook. Also, there was a misprint on the board that I had to try to figure out, like, what the heck is going on? Because there's a normal symbol, and then there's a symbol, and it had a +1. So it referred to your speedometer, which was points that you were going to get every single round. And I didn't know if that meant move up 2 spaces on there, or if it just moved up 1, and it was a misprint. And they basically clarified, it was a misprint, and it was an issue with that edition of the game. So kind of some unfortunate errors there, but nothing that's too terrible to overcome. If you really want to play this game, I wouldn't say that it was like a horrible rule book, but one that I do feel like could be improved quite a bit. The auditor die blocking the secondary action was a nice touch. So you had your primary action that you got with your die, and then you got to use that die to get a secondary action, either the same thing or another one. But the auditor die would actually block one of the actions that you could take every round. So you couldn't use that die for that secondary action. And I thought that was cool. It made me think about my decisions a little bit more, and kind of got in the way a little bit of my normal plans. No issues with color vision whatsoever, although completely colorblind people may have issues with the colors of the dice. There's no like double coding as far as that goes, but I did find the differences on them to be very, very big. So unless you're completely colorblind, you're probably going to be okay with these dice, which is good and very, very much appreciated. And then finally, there was a very solid, easy to maintain solo mode that I talked about in the description as well. That to me was very easy to just go figure out what you needed to do with the solo, and then just get back to your turn, which is exactly what I want. It did get in my way a little less than I'd like, but I still wound up scoring about halfway up the ladder as far as points go. So Yeah, I'm a little bit mixed on the scoring, like trying to figure out exactly what I would have done to maximize things a little bit better. I'm sure there's room for improvement, but I do feel like I would like to bump up the difficulty just a little bit on the solo as well. But I'd be interested to see how that affected my score. So for my final thoughts on this one, it's a fine roll and write. It's certainly one that I'm going to play again at some point. I just don't know when. Fleet, the dice game, is in my collection, and Three Sisters is also in my collection. So my completionist brain makes me really need to keep this in my collection, as well as some of the things that this does. I do really like. The upgrading of the actions and that engineering track was a lot of fun for me. Out of the three, I would give Fleet a slight edge over Three Sisters, but I would also give both quite a bit of an edge over Motor City. I felt that this was the weakest of the three, but it was still a very fine, good game. That, especially if the theme hits with you, like it's going to hit with others, that I was talking to. When I posted my pictures, everybody was saying, well, I kind of like Three Sisters theme better, or I like Fleet's theme better. And then some people would say, well, I really like Motor City's theme, the best. This looks like a game that I could get into. And I think that's definitely a consideration to make with this game, is if you're going to pick one up and start playing it, theme could very heavily influence that for me. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. Gonna stay around, but again, not exactly sure when I'm going to play it next over Fleet or Three Sisters at this point. So that was Motor City. And stay tuned, because coming up next, we have an interview with Josh Cappel, so stay tuned. On today's interview segment, we have Josh Cappel, designer of games like In Too Deep, the upcoming Wasabi, artist of games like Belfort, developer of games like Fossilis and Pyro Plants, and the graphic designer of games like Creature Comforts and Maple Valley. Josh, welcome to Cardboard Time.
Thanks a lot. Nice to be here.
Good to have you. So why don't you give the audience a little bit of an intro as to who you are and some other works that they might know you from?
Who am I? Like you said, my name is Josh. I'm a Canadian, live in Toronto. I've been in the game industry for probably close to 17 years now, doing graphic design and art for games at the beginning, and then eventually having my own designs published, and then ultimately partnering with my wife, Helena, to create a publishing company that she now runs. And I am now the creative director and art director for that company, which has blossomed into two companies. So that has grown into what I do. Some other games you might know me from, well, every single KTBG and Burnt Island game are games that I have done the graphic design for. I've designed a few of them. Some notable titles, like you said, are Creature Comforts, Fossilis, Wreck Raiders, In the Hollow Mountain King from Burnt Island, and the Modern Endeavor series of games as well from Burnt Island.
I'm definitely looking forward to playing some Endeavor. That's one that's caught my eye and haven't quite gotten to the table yet. Definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, the newest game in the series, Endeavor Deep Sea, I'm just finalizing the graphic design on it now and getting ready to go to print with that. So it is very much on my mind right now.
Awesome. Well, what made you branch out? You talked about a little bit the development of KTBG and Burnt Island. What made you branch out and decide this was something that the family wanted to do?
Well, I was sort of in the industry as a graphic designer and illustrator for a while, and I had been designing my own games. And there was one particular game of mine, a game design that was sort of abstract, and I didn't know how to successfully pitch it to a publisher. And it just kind of simmered at home for a while, and Helena was very aware of it. And she has always had a business mind where I have had no kind of a business mind at all. I'm a kind of a creative person, and that stuff is difficult for me. It's right up her alley. So she decided, hey, why not? Why don't we just start our own company to publish this game of yours that you're having trouble figuring out how to sell it to someone? So we did that. We worked on that game together for a while to the point where we now consider it a co-design. And it became our launch title, which was called Food Fighters, a little 2-player battle game. And that was the start of KTBG, or Kids Table Board Games. So Helena is really the driving force behind all of the business of that company. And I'm just the guy that makes the stuff that she then does something with.
Well, I think it happens to be a very good partnership and a very fruitful one at that. But one of the hallmarks for me of KTBG games is, an easy to learn rule set, but complex decision making. And what led you to this kind of design criteria that I happen to see over and over and over again in those games?
Right. I mean, that is our philosophy for the games that we choose to publish and how we develop them once they're in our hands. And the idea originally was because we had young children and we wanted to design and produce games that we could play with them, but that we could also play without them. So the games needed to be robust with decisions that adults and accomplished gamers would appreciate and enjoy, but also needed to be digestible, approachable, and executable by young children who, even if they weren't tactically aware of what they were trying to do, enjoyed what they were doing, and then were able to pick up on strategy and tactics as they played to get better at it as they go. So I guess, like I said, it started from having young kids that we wanted to play with, and then eventually it just turned into a guiding philosophy for the company that even though our kids are now grown to the point where they can play pretty much any game with us, we continue doing that and choosing those games. And our development team tries their hardest to keep me from overcomplicating the games, which I tend to do.
One other thing that's kind of a hallmark of KTPG is scalability, and a lot of games will have different things that you can either put in or take out to kind of assist some of the younger players. And it doesn't necessarily even need to be younger players. It can be people who aren't necessarily as familiar with the hobby. I'm assuming that's probably one of the same thing that you had the kids, you were trying to get more accessible games to the table with them. That's pretty much how that came to be as well.
Yes, that it is. And one thing that we've discovered as we've sort of evolved our approach with it along the way is that we always like to do it as a subtractable thing and not an additive thing. So if you begin with, here is the pared down game, and you can add these things to make it more complicated, people might never get to those things. And that's usually the most nuanced and robust version of the game that we like to have people experience. But if we do it the other way around, where we say we're going to present you in the rules, here is the whole game in all its glory, and then have a section that details here are specific things you can trim out for certain reasons to make it easier, more simple, more digestible for younger or more experienced players, that works better because it's usually the people who appreciate complicated rules that are reading the rules and learning the games. And then once they are familiar with them, they're able to pick stuff out and remove it for if they need to, for players that need that.
Now, an exciting release that you have coming to Kickstarter, it's going to be out today as this releases, is Wasabi. So what are the new things in this new version of Wasabi that people can expect?
All right. Wasabi was the first game I ever had published. It's a co-design with my cousin Adam Gertzbane, published via Z-Man Games in 2008. And it has sort of languished for years out of print, and we decided to bring it back because we really love it and think it will be appropriate for Kids Table as a Kids Table title. And anyone who's played Wasabi in the past knows that it is a very unforgiving and harsh game design, and that doesn't line up exactly with what Kids Table does. So we have revisited the game design and we have made it so that instead of the game punishing you at every turn, it is a lot more lenient on the players in terms of not rewarding success. So the game used to create quite a snowball for a player that was doing well, but inflicted some serious struggle on the players that weren't doing well. And after some years of developing games that people enjoy now, we know that players would rather have, instead of one player succeeding and everyone else struggling, they would rather have one player succeeding more and everyone else succeeding less. So the feeling at the table is more positive, and it just feels like everyone is accomplishing things and enjoying the game space on their turn instead of struggling to find a way. That was sort of the philosophical approach to how we were going to redesign the game. And then the specific things that we've added to the game or altered in the game, I guess it helps if people are familiar with the gist of the game, which is that it is a tile laying game similar to, I'm not really allowed to say it on paper, but it's similar to Scrabble, except that instead of words, you are creating sushi recipes using ingredient tiles. So you're laying tiles out on a shared board, and you're making patterns based on the recipe cards that are in your hand. So we've revisited all the components, made them ergonomically more easy to use than the original. And we also have added some new action cards that let you mess around with stuff that's on the board. We've created a whole bunch of fun new silly recipes, sushi recipes that you can create, and a couple of new ways to score for players. So I think that players who played it once or twice in the past, years ago, and come back to it won't really think that it feels much different from the original game, except in that it feels nicer to play. And players that are new to it are going to find that it sort of satisfies the description that players had, that other people had given them about what the game offers, which is just a fun, brain-burny, pattern-making game using sushi.
Well, and I think the gaming industry and game design has evolved a lot over the past 15 years. So I'm excited to see the different design decisions in that this brings to the table and really implements. I would love to go back and see the original Wasabi. I have not played it as of yet, but I'd love to compare the two. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, it's probably nerdier than most people would care to know about. But we played it and played it and played it and figured out where are the rough spots, where are the things that are making it unpleasant for people, where are the frustrating spots, and how can we polish those away or sand them off or add something that will balance that out.
Well, looking forward to that. Also looking forward to a release that I just heard is coming out on November 1st to retail, and that is Dice Veggies. People who listen to this channel absolutely know that I have such a love for Dice Veggies. It's one of my favorite new games this year, just for the sheer simplicity, but cool decisions that you get to make. The cool cleaver mechanism that you just it's so satisfying to chop a chunk of dice just off of a block, and there's a lot to love about that game. What was it like working with Rowan and Jory on that and producing a game with kids?
Jory is my son and Rowan is my niece. They were both 11, I guess probably even 10 when we started to work on the game. And this was a design that started name first. So we were brainstorming some ideas for a different game, and then the name of Dice Veggies came to us. And I thought, well, this has got to be a game already. We looked it up, and there was no such game. I already named this. And then just the idea of dice as vegetables and dicing, and from there came the notion of chopping, and from there came the cardboard knife. And Jory was like all over it right from the very beginning and wanting to be involved in it. So he and I just started like playing around with a cardboard. It was just a card at first, actually, just a card, and slicing, trying to figure out, is it a roll and write? Is it a drafting game? Are you choosing things? Are we cutting from the same pool of dice, and so on? And it eventually started to form into what it has become. And shortly after we kind of firmed up the very, very basics of the game, we went on a sort of a family getaway with my brother's family, and my niece Rowan expressed an amazing interest in being involved in it. And the three of us just kind of huddled together and got down to work. It was amazing working with them, kind of because they don't think like an established game designer ever would. They don't know the rules. They don't know the tenets of game design and the do's and the don'ts. And it was fun kind of mentoring them through it and not choosing things for them to not making the solutions for them, but kind of prompting them towards thinking about what is the problem that we're running up against and how can we think about solving it. And so we worked together in that way to really design the game together. I never ever worked on the game when the two of them weren't present. So we made sure that it was a joint project with the three of us. And we had such a great time looking up all the different recipes. It was harder than you might think to find all the varieties of recipes that would use these vegetables, but it was cool just sort of looking through exotic dishes from around the world and trying to find fun stuff to include in the game. Coming up with all the little scoring mechanisms on the hype cards. That was something that the three of us really worked hard on and worked a lot on together to make them fun and balanced and interesting and kind of silly sometimes. And I don't know, it was a great experience. I think they're both really smart and they're awesome kids. And I would love to design the game with either or both of them again anytime soon.
We would love to see it. With my experience with Dice Veggies, I'm all in for it. I'd love to see another game with them. What have you learned in the board game industry since you started? You've had a ton of roles. What things have you learned? What things have you learned not to do? I'd be very interested to hear that.
I've learned that I don't know anything about what games people are going to like and what games people are not going to like and what's going to land and what's going to not. We've been fairly successful with our choices, and the games that we make people seem to like. So we focus on the things that people like and we try to bring them more of the same feel, not the same experience, not the same mechanisms, not the same gameplay, but the same weight, the same sort of approachability and vibe around the table for the game. So I have learned how to be a better creative director and art director for our games. My role has shifted in the company as we have grown. So instead of illustrating everything the way I used to, now I work with illustrators and modelers and sometimes graphic designers to develop our games. And I've had to learn how to be an effective manager and director for our company instead of always being the guy pushing the mouse around the table. So that's one thing that I've had to learn. As far as the game industry goes, like I said, I don't know anything. I'm always very, very surprised by where trends go and what people are enjoying and what succeeds. So I've learned to sort of keep an eye on where things are going and try to stay slightly ahead of it if I can. And one other important thing that I've learned is to trust Helena with running the business, because she is just incredible at what she does. It's amazing watching her make connections, make arrangements, make deals with companies from all around the world, and lead us as a company into the success that we've had. So it's that's been an amazing thing to discover along the way.
No, fantastic answer. And out of all those hats that you've worn in the industry, what would be your favorite if you could only do one? From here on out, what would that be?
I used to think it was probably illustrator, but I've just been working with so many amazing illustrators that have simultaneously inspired me and discouraged me because of how great they are. But I think honestly, the thing that I would do if I could only do one thing would probably be to develop games. I think that's where the core of my passion in the industry lies, is making great games and making great games greater than they are. I think that's what my graphic design philosophy is. It's game development through visual development. So I try to engineer better outcomes of gameplay by the graphics that I apply to a game, and just make it work better and find new ways for players to enjoy the game based on the visuals. So that's what I love to do. That, and just developing the game in the raw sense, working with our development team. You probably know Sean Jackman. He is our communications guy, but he's also my development partner on every game we do. And he's just such an amazing sounding board for working on our games together and making them awesome.
Well, I think one thing that I have seen is that KTBG truly is a family business. And you mentioned Sean, and, Sean was kind of my first connection with you. And just the sense of community that he wants to build and the sense of a family that I get from the company any time that I interact with you is just fantastic. So I really get that vibe whenever I'm dealing with you at conventions, and it's always a pleasure for me.
Amazing. Thank you.
So, any new projects coming up that you want to talk about?
I'm actively working on 4 of our games right now beyond Endeavor. And then I know of 3 or 4 more that we've got signed and ready to begin work eventually. So I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say, honestly.
A lot in the hopper is what you can
yes,
say.
Yes, very much. At PAX, we're going to be unveiling a few things.
Awesome.
So that's at the end of November.
I'm looking forward to that a lot. That's one of my favorite conventions. What hobbies other than gaming do you have?
Let's see. My most recent hobby is watching the Blue Jays flame out spectacularly, and at the end of a season of baseball, that was not a productive postseason. We're a baseball family. We have been since the kids got interested in it, and of course when we were younger also. But we do a lot of going to baseball games, and we went on a baseball tour recently, like a multi-city baseball tour where we visited 3 different cities and saw baseball games in different stadiums, and that was really fun. Other hobbies, not much beyond gaming. I mean, I read, I play video games a little bit, not too much because I have an addictive personality and I get lost in them, so I've cut those out. But it's mostly just board games. I mean, how much room is there for other hobbies,
Not when you're a board gamer, I know that much. That's pretty much my entire time, either working on the house or producing a podcast or board gaming. And as much as I'd like to go and do other things, there isn't time. There's just no time.
Yeah.
So what is on your table? People can't see because this is an audio podcast, but you do have a ton of board games behind you. What is currently on your table?
Well, this is the office, the laboratory down here, and it's really messy, which is why I'm very glad that this is a audio podcast and nothing video. But I'm sure you can see a stack of various states of wasabi behind me over my left shoulder here. Back there, that's a table where one of our prototypes is out there being neglected as I work on Endeavor. And I don't know, that we've just got a big space here that has all of our prototyping and development gear over there, all of our replacement parts over there, and then our shelf of pride up above that has every single thing we've ever made up above my computer desk here. And then back on the back wall, that's the classic gamer's wall of games that just has shelf after shelf after shelf of games just sitting there.
Nice.
In various states of having been played.
Do you have an idea of, do you have a shelf of shame or shelf of opportunity?
I would say probably 20% of the games on that shelf have not yet been played. They've all been opened, and the rule book's read. But yeah, I think I like to think of it as opportunity, but who am I kidding? A lot of those games just sit there indefinitely.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Is I'm down to 141 as of this recording. We'll see how that actually fares, when this releases. But I would say that's about 20% of my collection. So
141 unplayed games in your collection?
Unplayed.
Woo. Okay. Well,
unplayed.
That's a lot.
It's a ton. It's a ton. Yeah. And it used to be upwards of 330.
Wow. So. Do you ever prune the collection down?
Yes. Actually, it's funny because in preparation for this, I was just kind of thinking, you know what? Let's get rid of some games, because that's a very valid way of getting things off of your shelf of shame, is selling them if they don't hold any interest to you anymore. Things I bought when I was, in Gadsden, Alabama in 2013, there was a sales shelf, and I'm like, I'll pick this up and play it eventually. And 10 years later, I still never have. So it's one of those things that I felt like it was time to let some stuff go, and I did. And it was like 10 games I sold off this past weekend. So
nice. Very, very good.
Yeah, kind of proud of that.
Yeah, what makes you keep a game?
I just kind of go by feel almost. And I just say, you know what? I'm not feeling this. I don't feel like I want to play it. I don't want to feel obligated to put the effort in to getting this to the table. I want to feel like this is something that I want to really truly get to the table. So, what about you?
Right. I mean, a lot of it is that, of course, and like whether it will actually get played or not, it plays a big part in it. There's probably a bunch of games in there that are just sort of you have to have them in your collection kind of games, and if you already have it, it's like a mainstay. A lot of games back there that are probably not going to be played anytime soon, but are just kind of convention collection staples that have just sort of earned their place, and they're going to stay there. Also, I mean, a big part of that collection back there is also games that I did art for or graphic design for other publishers. I was doing this for many years before we started our own company. So in addition to the 15 or 16 games we have made, I've got probably 30 or 40 more that I've worked on back there. So it fills up a lot of shelves just with those alone, and I won't get rid of those.
Yeah, it's kind of like a memento or a keepsake of the work that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it also speaks volumes. You have Wasabi out on the table, you have Endeavor out on the table, and I think you enjoy the games that you're developing and playing. So, I mean, that kind of speaks volumes when, what's on your table is the stuff that you're working on and the stuff that you're actually enjoying.
I find that most of the games that I play now are games that we are developing, and it's my ultimate goal when developing the game is that once we're done developing it, I'm going to still want to play it. Even though we've played it 1,000 times in the process of making it into what it is. And I found in the past that eventually we'll get the final manufactured copy of the game. It went through this whole process. It's been years in development, the Kickstarter, the weight, the manufacturer, the graphic design, everything. It's finally come to us. We take off the shrink wrap, we punch it out, we look at the game, it looks amazing, and then we don't play it. And then we put it back on the shelf. And then the game that we worked on so hard, it's just, no, I don't really feel like playing it. I played it so much before on the way. So now I try so hard to make games that we're going to continue to play. And the last few have been hitting that bell more reliably.
Yeah, because that's why I was going to ask, do you ever go on the shelf above you and take something down and say, hey, let's play this tonight? It's been a while.
Of our own games, you mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes we do. Recently, I suggested to Helena that we do a marathon, and we do a game night where we run through every single game that we've published in chronological order, and she is very into the idea. So we're gonna be putting that together soon.
I love that. I'd love to hear about that experience and kind of what you think about that after you do that.
I haven't yet done the math to figure out how long that will actually take, but I think it's doable in a single day.
Wow.
Definitely if we do the kids table and stay away from Burnt Island, because those are longer.
Yeah, those are a little bit longer for sure. So how can people get a hold of you on socials?
I'm not super active on social media. I'm losing more and more faith every day with social media. Now, KTBG and Burnt Island, we have company accounts that are staffed by Sean and sometimes Helena, and the two of them do a really good job of making fun and engaging content and letting people know about what we do. So looking up either of those brands is a way to just follow us and figure out what we're doing.
Oh, perfect. Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here, and looking forward to hearing how this marathon's going to go. Very excited for that.
Thanks. It's been my pleasure.
And make sure to check out Wasabi on Kickstarter today, and then make sure that you take a look. Once again, I've said it multiple times, go take a look at Dice Veggies. It's amazing. November 1st. Go check it out. Well, I think that will do it for us today. If you do want more information about Cardboard Time, you can always go to the website at cardboardtime.com. Our Instagram and Twitter is at cardboard_time. Blue Sky is at Cardboard Time, no underscore. Twitch is twitch.tv/Cardboard Time. Check that out on the 18th, which is this Saturday, for a live playthrough starting at noon Eastern. Our Discord is on the Tabletop Express server. You can always email us for an invite. And speaking of that email, In addition to that, if you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, please email cardboardtime@gmail.com. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you around the table in 3 weeks for our PAX U wrap-up and another episode of Cardboard Time.